What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA
Monday, April 5th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, we have a 7-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Derrick Rose from the New York Knicks playing the Brooklyn Nets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing point guards, Derrick Rose has averaged 24.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 24 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. He scored 18 and 14 fantasy points in his last 2 games, playing 20 and 25 minutes. He's projected at 25.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. He's $4,900 FanDuel salary and $100 less on DraftKings. And I like this pick because he scored 35, 46, and 30 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Nets. Vegas thinks there's going to be 217.5 points scored in this game, so I like Derrick Rose here versus the Brooklyn Nets. Another point guard that I like is Chris Paul from the Phoenix Suns playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Chris Paul has averaged 37.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 49, 43, and 31 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 21, 32, and 30 minutes. He's projected at 37.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's $7,400 FanDuel salary and $900 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. I like this pick because he scored 26, 50, 50, 27, and 44 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Rockets. So he would have crushed 5 times value in 3 of those 5 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 219 points scored in this game. It's a good matchup. So I like Chris Paul, especially on FanDuel, here versus the Houston Rockets.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $100 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and then we'll send you $100 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like DeMar DeRozan from the San Antonio Spurs playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have the 13th worst defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing shooting guards, DeMar DeRozan has averaged 38.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 34, 55, and 42 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 46, and 33 minutes. He's projected at 39.9 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's $7,900 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. He scored 29, 44, 37, 31, and 43 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Cavaliers. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 216.5 points scored in this game. So I like DeMar DeRozan here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Gary Trent Jr. from the Toronto Raptors playing the Washington Wizards, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Gary Trent Jr. has averaged 22.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. But he scored 41, 39, and 32 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 29, 36, and 37 minutes. So I think he can score you 30 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,400 FanDuel salary, but he is $1,200 more on DraftKings. So he would need around 35 fantasy points to hit 5 times value on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. And he scored 25 and 39 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Wizards. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. So it's a great matchup, a fast-paced game, and a high-scoring game. So I like Gary Trent Jr., especially on FanDuel here versus the Washington Wizards. Okay, who do we have at the small forward position? I like Keldon Johnson from the San Antonio Spurs playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have the 13th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing small forwards. Keldon Johnson has averaged 25.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He scored 35, 15, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 26, and 26 minutes. He's projected at 24.9 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score you 28 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,300 FanDuel salary and $200 more on DraftKings. And he scored 58 and 18 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Cavaliers. So I like that he's a low price with some monster upside. So I like Keldon Johnson here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, another small forward that I like is Buddy Hield from the Sacramento Kings playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Buddy Hield has averaged 28.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He scored 26, 28, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 28, and 31 minutes. He's projected at 27 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 32 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more on both sites. He's $5,800 FanDuel salary and $100 more on DraftKings. I also like this pick because he scored 24, 51, 24, 32, and 24 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves. So that's pretty good player versus team history for his price point. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 236.5 points scored in this game. Fantastic matchup, fast-paced game, and a super high-scoring game. So I like Buddy Hield here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, who do we have at the power forward position? I like Harrison Barnes from the Sacramento Kings playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Harrison Barnes has averaged 30.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 30, 41, and 34 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 37, and 34 minutes. He's projected at 30 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's $5,900 FanDuel salary and $400 more on DraftKings. He scored 30, 17, 24, 26, and 24 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves. But this is going to be a high-scoring game. 236.5 points scored in this game. Fantastic matchup. So I like Harrison Barnes here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now I got a high-risk, high-reward tournament play. I like Davis Bertans from the Washington Wizards playing the Toronto Raptors, who have the 12th worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Davis Bertans, he's averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 14 fantasy points last game in 20 minutes, and in this matchup, based on his player versus team history, I think he can score 20 fantasy points or more as long as he gets 20 minutes or more, and that would be 5 times value or more on both sites. He's $3,700 FanDuel salary, and he's $100 less on DraftKings. He scored 17, 19, 24, 22, and 14 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Raptors. We know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 228.5 points scored in this game. It's a great matchup, so I like Davis Bertans as a high-risk, high-reward tournament play here versus the Toronto Raptors. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz playing the Dallas Mavericks, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing centers. And Rudy Gobert has averaged 41 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 31, 40, and 35 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 20, 32, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 39.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's pretty much 5 times value, and he's $8,100 FanDuel salary, and he's $200 less on DraftKings. And I like this pick because he scored 33, 71, 23, 39, and 56 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Mavericks. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 226.5 points scored in this game. So I like the monster upside that he has in his player versus team history. So I like Rudy Gobert here versus the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, another center that I like is LaMarcus Aldridge from the Brooklyn Nets playing the New York Knicks, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing centers, but LaMarcus Aldridge has averaged 25.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 24 and 40 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 26 and 29 minutes. He's projected at 26 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score you 30 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,800 FanDuel salary, and he's $200 less on DraftKings. Now I like this pick because he scored 41, 35, 31, and 27 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Knicks. Now, just a word of caution, this is a back-to-back, so I'll be a little cautious with this play, but I like LaMarcus Aldridge here versus the New York Knicks.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.